That's what it felt like. Braun Breakker didn't show up on WWE RAW like a man waiting for his moment. He didn't walk in to shake hands, trade respect, or wait for someone to hand him a torch. He walked in like a demolition crew. Not smiling. Not apologizing. Just ready to destroy whatever, or whoever, stood between him and the throne. Most men slow down when they see Roman Reigns. They get careful. Quiet. Strategic. Braun? He walked faster. No theatrics. No gimmick. No fanfare. Just pure, unshakable energy wrapped in the frame of a wrecking machine. The kind of intensity you can't fake. The kind that says, this isn't hype. This is happening. And then it did. In a moment that felt ripped out of an entirely different era, maybe even a different universe, Braun Breakker walked straight up to Roman Reigns and didn't blink. The self-proclaimed tribal chief, a man who's held WWE hostage for over 3 years, stood there with all his gold, all his legacy, all his aura. And Braun didn't care. You built the table? I'm here to flip it. To understand the magnitude of what happened on Raw, you have to understand this: WWE doesn't allow just anyone to step up to Roman Reigns. For years now, Roman has been more than a champion. He's a brand. A dynasty. A walking, talking monument to dominance. He doesn't just win matches, he ends careers. John Cena? Beaten. Brock Lesnar? Neutralized. Cody Rhodes? WrestleMania dreams shattered. Every challenger who stepped to him either walked away broken, or disappeared into creative limbo. Roman didn't just defeat people. He absorbed them into the mythology of the bloodline. You didn't fight Reigns. You fed him. But Braun didn't come to get devoured. He came to break the cycle. And when he got in Roman's face, his body squared up, his voice low, his eyes locked in, it wasn't the kind of promo you hear every Monday night. It wasn't performative. It was primal. You built the table. I'm here to flip it. That line hit harder than a steel chair to the spine. Not because it was clever, but because it was real. Wrestling, at its best, is about timing. Not just the technical timing of a suplex or a finish, but the storytelling timing, the ability to walk into a scene exactly when the crowd needs you most. And whether Braun Breakker knows it or not, this was that moment. Raw was flat. The crowd was tired. The main event scene? Predictable. Roman was champion, but not present. The bloodline was stretched thin. Fans were starting to whisper what nobody wanted to admit: is this getting stale? Enter Braun. No warning. No trailer. He didn't come out to someone else's music. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't tweet some mysterious emoji hours before the show. He just showed up, and started writing a new chapter. Not with words. With presence. He stood next to Roman like he'd been there all along. And that's what shook the foundation. Because here was someone not shaped by fear. Not defined by legacy. Not tied to the old order. He wasn't there to protect the house Roman built. He was there to tear it down. You know the moment I'm talking about. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet. That eerie, weighty silence where 1,000 fans are holding their breath, not sure whether to cheer or gasp or check if this is even real. Because everything in that moment felt wrong, and perfect at the same time. Roman, the untouchable monarch of WWE, wasn't yelling. He wasn't posing. He wasn't flanked by Solo or Jimmy. He was just standing there. Watching. Trying to read Braun's face like a poker player holding a bad hand. And Braun? No fear. No flinch. Just eye contact like a sniper with a locked-in target. No one touched anyone. No music hit. No punch thrown. But the temperature in that ring dropped 20 degrees. Because something had shifted. There's a code in WWE. You don't interrupt the king unless you've already got an army behind you, or a belt around your waist. And even then, you tiptoe. The only people who've ever truly stood toe-to-toe with Reigns in the last 3 years were either legends with names like Cena or Lesnar, or desperate rebels like Sami Zayn and Cody Rhodes, trying to prove they belonged in the same breath. But Braun? He didn't try to belong. He acted like he already did. And that kind of confidence, when it's not backed by years of main event prestige, usually gets you buried. Fast. Quietly. But that didn't happen here. Because for the first time in a long time, Roman didn't have a scripted answer. He just smirked. That smirk said a lot. It said, "I wasn't expecting you." It said, "You've got guts." And it might have said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." But here's what it didn't say: "You don't belong here." What the hell happens now? That's the question everyone is asking. Because Braun didn't just walk into Raw and challenge a man, he challenged an era. He took everything Roman Reigns has built since 2020 and threatened to tear it down in one line. And now we're all wondering, was this a one-time tease, or the beginning of a full-on collision course? Will Braun keep showing up on Raw? Will Roman retaliate, or disappear again until a major PPV? Is this WWE's way of building a new king while the old one still wears the crown? Whatever it is, it's working. WWE is on fire again, not because of a title defense, but because someone dared to break the rules. Braun Breakker didn't just shake things up. He threw the entire main event scene into a blender and hit obliterate. Let's be honest. Wrestling fans have been begging for new blood for months. We've had amazing matches, solid storytelling, and jaw-dropping athleticism. But we've also had predictability. We knew Roman would win. We knew who was next. We knew how the script went. Until now. Braun Breakker walked into Raw and did something that felt impossible in 2025. He made WWE feel dangerous again. Not because of weapons. Not because of violence. But because for the first time in years, no one knows what's going to happen next. And that's the magic of wrestling at its peak. Braun didn't come to play the game. He came to flip the board. Who was Braun Breakker? The man who looked Roman Reigns in the eye without flinching didn't come out of nowhere. Braun Breakker has been building to that moment his whole life, even if most of the world hadn't been paying attention. He didn't arrive on Raw by accident. He was engineered for this. Molded by bloodline, hardened by grind, and unleashed on an industry that's been starving for something real. Let's start at the beginning. But don't expect a fairy tale. This is a war story. Braun Breakker was born Bronson Rechsteiner. That last name should sound familiar. He's the son of Rick Steiner and the nephew of Scott Steiner, the Steiner brothers. If you grew up watching late-80s and 90s wrestling, you know exactly who they were. If you didn't, picture 2 brick walls with arms who suplexed their way through everyone in sight. They were intense, explosive, and sometimes unhinged. That's the DNA Braun carries in every cell of his body. But here's where it gets interesting. WWE didn't let Braun carry the Steiner name when he debuted. That wasn't by accident. It was a test. A challenge. Prove you're not here riding your father's coattails. Prove you're your own weapon. Prove you don't need a legacy, you are one. So he did. NXT 2.0 was chaotic when Braun arrived. A colorful rebrand. Developmental turned into digital graffiti. But Braun stood out like a fist through a windshield. No flash. No gimmick. Just rage, muscle, and momentum. He wasn't polished. He wasn't trying to be. He was a human battering ram, and every week someone new got flattened. In just a few months, Braun Breakker went from unknown rookie to NXT champion. Not a slow climb. Not a polite handshake. A blitzkrieg. He took down Tommaso Ciampa, a veteran with main roster credibility and years of fan loyalty, and ripped the title from him like it was inevitable. Because for Braun, it was. This wasn't about earning respect. It was about claiming space. Taking territory. Letting everyone know that the future wasn't waiting, it was already here, and it hit like a freight train. But he didn't stop there. Braun defended that title like it belonged to him from birth. Against veterans. Against newcomers. Against guys with more charisma, more experience, and more polish. It didn't matter. He ran through them all. Because while other superstars talked about climbing the mountain, Braun treated the mountain like it owed him something. He had the speed of a linebacker, the explosiveness of a prime Lesnar, and a primal intensity that felt like it could boil a room just by walking into it. And here's the thing. He wasn't always pretty in the ring. He didn't always hit every mark clean. He wasn't perfect. But every time he stepped between the ropes, you believed him. That's rare in wrestling. Plenty of guys have the look. Plenty have the moves. Very few have the energy where you think, if this were a real fight, he'd walk out of the ring while the other guy left in pieces. Braun had that. And still does. But NXT was never the end goal. He said it in interviews. He said it in backstage segments. He said it with his eyes every time he stared through the camera after a match. He wasn't built to dominate the B-show. He was built for war, and Raw was the battlefield he was after. So what took him so long? Because WWE waited. Because they needed the right moment. They needed him to be more than dangerous. They needed him to be undeniable. And that's exactly what he became. By 2024, fans started asking the question, why hasn't Braun been called up yet? Why isn't he challenging for a bigger spot? The answer was strategy. WWE didn't want Braun to debut in some random tag match or backstage segment. They wanted shock and awe. They wanted a moment. And that's what they got on Raw, the night he stepped up to Roman Reigns. But to understand the gravity of that move, you have to understand what Braun represents. He's not just another up-and-comer. He's a rebellion wrapped in muscle and molded into a missile. This isn't a guy trying to cash in on a hot run. This is a guy trained to destroy. From childhood, he's been raised around wrestling. He's been sparring with beasts, watching tapes, and absorbing knowledge from two of the toughest men ever to lace up boots. And here's what makes him even more dangerous than his uncles ever were, he's disciplined. Scott Steiner was chaos. Rick was a mauler. Braun? He's both, but with a sharp, focused edge. He doesn't just hit hard. He hits smart. He doesn't just explode. He controls it. He studies his targets. He moves like a predator who knows he only has to strike once. That's why his stare down with Roman Reigns worked. He didn't scream. He didn't posture. He didn't run his mouth until the crowd got bored. He looked at the biggest star in the company and made it clear, I'm not impressed. And I'm not afraid. When you think about the kinds of guys who've challenged Roman in the past, Edge, Bryan, Owens, Rollins, you realize something, they all played the game. They all came in with respect, angles, alliances. Braun? None of that. He walked in cold. Raw power. Pure focus. No history with Roman. No need for it. Just a target. And that's what made it terrifying. Because Braun isn't fueled by nostalgia. He doesn't care about the bloodline storyline. He's not here to complete a saga. He's here to tear one down. To him, Roman is just a roadblock. A big one. A decorated one. But a roadblock all the same. And that's the kind of threat WWE hasn't had in years. This is why fans and insiders are buzzing. Because Braun Breakker is that rare crossover between the past and the future. He's got the genetics of the old school, the engine of the modern athlete, and the hunger of someone who didn't come to play second string. People talk about torch passing in wrestling. They talk about earning your place. But Braun doesn't believe in torches. He believes in fire. And when he stepped to Roman Reigns, that fire ignited. Now the question isn't who is Braun Breakker. The question is, how long until he burns the whole kingdom down? Because if this is just the beginning, if Braun is only now getting started, then Roman Reigns might not be defending his legacy. He might be watching it end. And the scariest part? Braun Breakker is still getting better. To understand why Braun Breakker stepping to Roman Reigns mattered, you first have to understand the kingdom he walked into. Roman Reigns isn't just a champion. He's an empire. For over 3 years, he's turned the WWE main event scene into his own private domain. Every story passed through him. Every rivalry bent to his pace. Every challenger eventually fell in line, or disappeared. He became not just the final boss, but the entire level. And he didn't do it with catchphrases or crowd work. He did it with dominance. It didn't start that way. Reigns' first run as WWE's Chosen One was rocky. Rejected by the fans. Overscripted. Forced into the mold of a traditional babyface. The crowd never bought it. They booed the push. They turned on the story. Roman Reigns was positioned as the next Cena, but the audience wasn't interested in another superhero. They wanted authenticity. Danger. Power. Roman gave them that in 2020. When the world was silent, and the arenas were empty, he turned off the character and turned on the instinct. He came back not as a savior, but as a conqueror. A cold-blooded tactician who didn't need applause, only control. That's when the bloodline began. Not just a faction. A philosophy. A hierarchy. A family narrative built on loyalty, fear, and manipulation. Roman dubbed himself the tribal chief, a title soaked in both heritage and threat. He wasn't just champion, he was the provider. The protector. The punisher. And he built that reputation one body at a time. He didn't just beat Jey Uso, he made him bow. He didn't just defeat Kevin Owens, he outlasted him. Edge, Bryan, Cesaro, Cena, Baylor, Lesnar, the list goes on. Every match became a ritual. Roman would walk in, composed, calculating. His opponents would bring fire. The crowd would believe. And then, systematically, methodically, Roman would take them apart. Not just physically. Psychologically. He turned main events into chess matches. And he always played 2 moves ahead. What made it even more brutal was how silent his dominance was. He didn't scream. He didn't celebrate. He spoke in calm, dangerous tones. He demanded respect. Demanded obedience. And if he didn't get it, he took it. That's not just a wrestling character. That's a power structure. Roman Reigns became the central figure in WWE not by accident, but by design. He held both the Universal and WWE championships. He unified belts. Headlined WrestleManias. Controlled narratives. He didn't just defeat his enemies, he reshaped the company around his existence. And everyone knew their place. The Usos fell in line. Even after years of independence, they bent to Roman's will. Jey tried to resist. He got brutalized. Jimmy tried to intervene. He got sidelined. And when Solo Sikoa arrived, he didn't come in swinging. He came in serving. Paul Heyman, one of the most influential minds in wrestling history, called Roman the greatest of all time, while standing by his side like a consigliere to a mafia boss. Not out of flattery. Out of fear. Out of admiration. Out of calculation. Because Roman didn't ask you to love him. He asked you to fall in line. That's why Braun Breakker stepping up hit like a seismic event. Because for 3 years, this system has gone unchallenged. There have been attempts. Cody Rhodes came closest. The perfect challenger. The perfect story. The perfect stage. WrestleMania 39. The crowd was ready for a changing of the guard. But Roman held. With interference. With tactics. With cold strategy. He kept the gold. He kept the power. And WWE kept rolling. Why? Because as much as fans may crave change, the machine respects consistency. Roman Reigns delivered big match energy every time. He was safe. Proven. Iconic. The longer the reign went, the more invincible he felt. And invincibility breeds control. Backstage, it's no secret, Reigns has pull. Creative respect. Protection. He doesn't show up weekly, and no one questions it. He doesn't wrestle every premium live event, and no one complains. He's not just part of the business, he's become the business. So when someone new comes along, especially someone raw, untested, and hungry, the machine tightens up. But it didn't tighten fast enough for Braun. Because Braun Breakker didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a handshake from Triple H. He didn't earn his spot through comedy segments or six-man tags. He took the shortcut every alpha male in wrestling history has taken at least once. He found the biggest guy in the room, and punched him metaphorically in the mouth. That's how it used to be. Stone Cold didn't politely request a push. He stormed the system. The Rock didn't stay in the mid-card. He outshined everyone. Brock Lesnar walked in and decimated The Rock in his rookie year. Braun followed that blueprint. And he aimed it at a dynasty. Which raises the stakes. Because Roman Reigns isn't just a title holder. He's a fortress. An institution. You don't beat him with momentum. You don't beat him with one good promo. You have to survive him. You have to navigate his mind games, his allies, his aura, his strategy. You have to play the long game. And that's the trap. Because Roman's power doesn't come from his moveset. It comes from his system. The structure he built. The fear he injects into the roster. The loyalty he demands and enforces. No one rises without facing that wall. And no one has climbed it without scars. But Braun didn't come to climb. He came with a wrecking ball. And the reason that stare down on Raw froze the audience wasn't just the tension. It was the implication. What if the wall can finally be broken? What if the Reigns era isn't unshakable anymore? Because dominance like Roman's doesn't last forever. Not in this business. At some point, the invincible become vulnerable. The kings get challenged. The aura fades. The fear cracks. Roman's reign has been built on loyalty, intimidation, and perfect timing. But now, there's someone who doesn't care about any of that. Who isn't playing chess. Who isn't trying to survive the system. He's trying to destroy it. And if that happens, everything changes. Because if Roman Reigns isn't feared anymore, if he's not untouchable anymore, then the entire bloodline story collapses. And WWE, for the first time in years, becomes unpredictable again. It didn't feel like a debut. It felt like a raid. Braun Breakker didn't walk into Raw with music cues or backstage teasers. He didn't walk through the curtain with a smile. He didn't walk out in the middle of a filler segment, escorted by security, or hyped by commentary. He walked straight into the flagship show of WWE like he owned it. And within 3 minutes, everyone watching knew, this wasn't a promo. This was a takeover. The night started like any other. The crowd was buzzing, but not electric. Roman Reigns, flanked by Paul Heyman, was expected to make one of his rare Raw appearances. Fans were already tuned in for that. Even in 2025, the presence of Roman Reigns, live, in person, was still treated like an event. The tribal throne had been wheeled to the stage. Red lights. Gold lighting. A quiet reverence filled the air. Then Reigns walked out. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't angry. He was calm, in that calculated way he's perfected. Belt over his shoulder, slow steps, eyes steady. His music hit. The crowd reacted, not with thunderous cheers or overwhelming heat, but with that dense kind of noise that means, he's here. We're paying attention. He stepped into the ring. Picked up the mic. And before a word left his mouth, Braun Breakker's music hit. But this wasn't a pop. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't confusion. It was shock. Some people in the arena gasped. Others stood up instinctively. And some just stood frozen, trying to process what they were seeing. Braun didn't hesitate. He didn't do the usual ramp pose. He didn't signal to the crowd. He didn't milk the entrance. He marched. Straight down the ramp. Locked in. Shoulders squared. Not sprinting, not slow walking. Just walking with purpose like he had an appointment, and Roman Reigns was late for it. The camera angle tightened. We didn't get the wide shot. We didn't cut to the crowd. We stayed tight. Close up. One shot. Braun's eyes, focused, ruthless, cold, and Roman watching him with the kind of smirk that wasn't quite amusement, and not quite fear either. More like recognition. The ring, for the first time in what felt like years, felt small. Because you weren't looking at a crowd anymore. You weren't watching a performance. You were watching two apex predators on a collision course, and only one of them knew it was coming. Braun slid into the ring. No posturing. No stare to the crowd. No nod to the camera. He walked right up to Roman Reigns and stopped inches from his face. Reigns didn't move. The crowd had gone mostly silent now. Not dead, not bored, just tense. The kind of silence that means everyone is waiting for something real to happen. A line. A punch. A spark. Paul Heyman shifted uneasily. You could see it. His body language betrayed the moment. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Braun wasn't scheduled. Braun wasn't briefed. Braun wasn't supposed to be here. And then, finally, he spoke. You built the table? The words came out low. Controlled. Deliberate. Roman raised one eyebrow. Slight smirk. Waiting. Calculating. Braun didn't give him a beat. I'm here to flip it. And just like that, the air was gone. There were no fireworks. No brawling. No dramatic pull-aparts. Just that line, and the two of them, locked in a silent war of energy. Reigns didn't speak. He didn't lift the mic. He didn't call for security or signal Solo Sikoa from the back. He smirked again. But this time it was tighter. Not quite confident. Not quite dismissive. It was the kind of smirk that says, I've seen a lot of guys step to me, but none like this. Because Braun didn't come with history. He didn't come with alliances. He didn't come to talk about respect, legacy, or opportunity. He came with intention. And that's what shook Roman. Because every challenger before had some kind of tether to the WWE ecosystem. They had backstage allies, reputations, histories. But Braun? Braun was a stray bullet. No narrative. No loyalty. No emotional baggage. Just hunger and purpose. That makes him more dangerous than any bloodline betrayal ever did. When you strip away all the pageantry, all the promos, all the corporate polish, this was the first time Roman Reigns had to look across the ring and realize. This man doesn't want to join the table. He wants to break it into splinters. In that moment, the crowd knew, this wasn't just a tease. This was a statement. Because Braun Breakker didn't ask for a title shot. He didn't demand a match. He didn't even mention championships. He did something far more violent. He declared himself the end of Roman's reign, without even touching him. And that's what makes it brilliant. Because Roman's whole persona, his empire, his mythos, has been built on one thing. Control. He controls matches. Narratives. People. Braun didn't play into that. He didn't try to challenge Roman's power. He ignored it. That's how you dismantle control. Not with defiance. With disregard. Braun treated Roman Reigns like a gate in his way. And he made it clear, he's not asking for it to open. He's kicking it down. So what happens next? Does Roman retaliate? Does Heyman negotiate? Does Solo step in? Or, does Roman do nothing? Because maybe, just maybe, he recognizes something. Maybe this isn't the kind of fight you can outthink. Maybe Braun Breakker isn't part of the game at all. Maybe he's here to flip the whole board. That's the danger. That's the story. That's the war that just got declared in 5 words. You built the table? I'm here to flip it. And in that single sentence, Braun didn't just insert himself into the main event picture. He redrew it entirely. In wrestling, volume is everything. The roar of the crowd. The slam of the mat. The echo of a mic drop. Noise is the currency. It's how emotions get measured. But there's one tool far more powerful than yelling, and Roman Reigns knows how to wield it better than almost anyone in the business: silence. What happened on Raw wasn't defined by what was said. It was defined by what wasn't. Braun Breakker dropped a 5-word bomb. Roman Reigns didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Didn't blink. And that silence, that icy stillness, was louder than any promo. Let's break down why. Silence in wrestling is an act of dominance. It's not passivity. It's not weakness. It's control. Think about it, the guy who controls the pacing of the moment controls the psychology. And Roman Reigns has made a career out of letting other people yell while he watches. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't overreact. He studies. And in the world of wrestling psychology, that's the scariest reaction you can get. When someone shouts at you, you know what to do: shout back, swing first, escalate. But when someone stands there and watches you like a predator in the dark, your brain starts filling in the blanks. And fear loves blanks. That's why Roman Reigns didn't speak when Braun Breakker confronted him. He didn't need to. Because Roman understands that in high-stakes moments, silence says, I've already decided what happens next. You just don't know it yet. But this time, something was different. This time, silence felt risky. Roman's power in silence usually comes from control. He's the one who speaks last. He's the one who smirks. He's the one who draws you into his pace, his rhythm, his frame. But when Braun stood in front of him, Roman's silence didn't look calculated. It looked cautious. Not fear. Not doubt. But calculation of a different kind. Braun's silence matched his. And that's new territory. Because most guys come in loud. Think about the challengers: Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre, Cody Rhodes. Even Sami Zayn. They used words to try to break Roman's grip. Long promos. Passion. Speeches about legacy. Crowds behind them. Braun didn't come with passion. He came with a threat. And instead of meeting silence with words, he returned silence with more silence. 2 men standing in a ring, saying almost nothing, and suddenly, thousands of people were hanging on every movement. That's the power of psychology. It's also how you separate real tension from scripted conflict. Because scripted conflict has cues. It has steps. You say your line. They say theirs. Then we cue the music, the surprise interference, the cut to commercial. But real tension throws all of that out. Real tension doesn't need choreography. It holds itself. And that's what happened on Raw. Let's break it into layers. First, Braun enters. No theatrics. No pandering. That alone set the tone. He wasn't there for a moment. He was there for confrontation. Second, Roman smirks, but doesn't speak. In most situations, this smirk would signal confidence. But here, it felt thinner. Like it was hiding a thought he hadn't quite resolved. Third, Bron doesn't flinch. He doesn't look away. He says one sentence, and lets it hang. And then, nothing. That nothing is where the drama lives. Because here's the truth about silence in wrestling, it forces the audience to participate. They have to fill in the gaps. They have to ask themselves, what's Roman thinking? What's Braun waiting for? Who's going to move first? The crowd, consciously or not, becomes the third character in the ring. And Roman knows that. For 3 years, he's mastered this art. He pauses mid-match. He speaks during submissions. He slows down everything. Not because he's lazy, but because he's drawing focus. He wants you hanging on his breath, not his punch. So when Braun stepped into that space, and used the same weapon, Roman knew this was different. He saw it in Braun's eyes. This wasn't someone looking for approval. This wasn't someone overwhelmed by the moment. This was someone calculating, just like him. And that realization didn't lead to fireworks. It led to more silence. Because in the highest levels of psychological warfare, saying less is how you say more. There's a term in combat sports, pressure without movement. It's when a fighter stands so close, so confident, so calm, that you start to unravel. You start to move faster, breathe harder, make mistakes. Not because of what they did, but because of what they might do. That's what Braun brought into the ring. He didn't speak like a rookie. He moved like a man who knew what kind of storm he was walking into, and didn't care. And Roman, for the first time in a long time, looked like he didn't know the next move. Because silence is only a weapon when you're the one holding it. When your opponent brings the same tool, it becomes a duel. And that's what RAW became. A silent duel between two men who know exactly what they're capable of, and don't need to say it out loud. This is where storytelling in wrestling reaches another level. When you can get an entire arena to go quiet, when you can get millions watching at home to lean forward in their seats, all without throwing a punch or raising your voice, that's power. And that power doesn't come from writing. It comes from presence. Braun has it. Roman has refined it. And now, they're locked in a psychological arms race. So where does it go from here? Does someone break the silence? Does Braun speak next time? Does Roman strike first? Or do they continue this dangerous game of who breaks character first? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about titles. This is about control. Who commands the energy of the room? Who sets the temperature? Who dictates the pace of the story? So far, Roman's held that crown. But Braun just cracked the casing. And he did it by saying almost nothing. That's the genius of silence. The moment Braun Breakker stepped up to Roman Reigns, it wasn't just a segment, it was a message. Not to the fans. Not even to Roman directly. It was a message to the entire WWE locker room. The hierarchy just got challenged. And when something shakes the top of the mountain, the tremors don't stay up there. They roll all the way down. What happened on RAW didn't just shock the arena. It sent the roster backstage into a quiet kind of chaos. Because if Braun Breakker can walk into RAW unannounced and put the tribal chief on notice, that means no one's spot is safe. Let's make one thing clear, wrestling might be scripted, but the locker room pecking order is real. It's built on years, politics, respect, money, and moments. Newcomers don't just jump to the front of the line. And if they try, the old guard pushes back, hard. So when Braun walked straight past the script, skipped every unwritten protocol, and stood eye to eye with the guy on top, every single person watching from gorilla position saw what this really was, a challenge to the system. Some admired it. Some hated it. Everyone felt it. Because WWE has always been more than just entertainment, it's a machine. One with departments, favorites, rotations, politics, and pecking orders. People who wait years for title opportunities. Mid-carders grinding week after week for 5 minutes of TV time. Veterans hoping creative hasn't forgotten them. Rising stars trying to prove they're more than enhancement talent. And then Braun showed up and took the main event spotlight without saying more than a sentence. That doesn't go unnoticed. That creates waves. Immediately after Raw, there were reports, some real, some rumored, about the backstage reaction. Whispers from talent. Reactions from producers. A little tension from some guys who've been waiting patiently to climb the ladder, only to watch this powerhouse smash straight through it. Imagine you're a guy like Ricochet, busting your body every week for 5 to 8 minutes on live TV, and you see Braun get one stare down and dominate headlines for 48 hours. How would you feel? Or think about someone like Chad Gable. Technical genius. Years of service. Slowly building momentum. Fan support growing. Still waiting for the company to really go all in on him. Then Braun arrives and skips the line. This is the kind of moment that splits the locker room. Not everyone resents it. Some see Braun as the real deal. A guy who looks the part, moves like a freak athlete, and brings an edge the product's been missing. But others? They see an outsider. A fast-tracked project with the right genetics and the right connections. And no matter how legitimate Braun's work ethic is. And by all accounts, it's real, perception matters. And perception in a locker room is everything. Because respect isn't just about talent. It's about time. So what does this confrontation do to the WWE roster as a whole? It creates uncertainty. And in a tightly managed company like WWE, that's a rare and dangerous thing. If Braun is being positioned to dethrone Roman, or even just threaten him, it means the company is willing to rearrange the entire top tier of the card. That affects everyone. Seth Rollins? He's been carrying Raw with the World Heavyweight Championship while Roman holds the undisputed crown. Does Braun leapfrog him? Cody Rhodes? Just finished a legendary arc trying to finish the story. How does he feel watching someone new get inserted into the main event mix without any of the same build-up? LA Knight? Just broke through with huge crowd reactions. Is he next, or did Braun just cut the line? These questions ripple behind the curtain. Not always with confrontation. But with caution. With calculation. Because WWE, at its core, is a business. And in a business, when someone jumps the queue, people start reassessing their value. Their role. Their security. Even Roman himself, unshaken on the surface, feels the ripple effect. He knows the game. He's been in this system long enough to recognize when someone's being positioned to challenge not just his title, but his status. And that's what makes Braun different. This wasn't about winning a match. This was about unseating a figurehead. When you do that, you don't just make enemies, you shift alliances. There are probably guys in the locker room who watched Braun confront Roman and immediately thought, if he pulls this off, I want to be aligned with him. And there are others who thought, if he's getting pushed, I better find a way to outshine him, fast. That's where the real tension begins. Because when someone like Braun Breakker changes the equation, everything becomes fluid again. Creative meetings shift. Feuds are paused. Spotlights get redirected. Merchandising plans adjust. Commentary cues change. Producers rethink pairings. All from a 5-minute, mostly silent segment. That's how you know it worked. Because true disruption doesn't come from chaos. It comes from precision. Braun didn't yell. He didn't jump Roman. He didn't need pyro or a pipe bomb. He stepped into Roman's space and said, I'm not playing your game. That takes presence. That takes guts. But it also takes protection. Because nobody does that without clearance. That means someone in power, maybe Triple H, maybe creative, maybe Vince if he's still lurking in the shadows, signed off on this. which sends another wave through the locker room. It tells the rest of the roster, this guy has backing. This guy has trust. And we're investing in him now. That puts every other rising star on alert. And you better believe they're watching. Grayson Waller, Bronson Reed, Austin Theory, Ilya Dragunov. These guys are all in the pipeline. They're all waiting to hit that next level. Braun stepping into the spotlight isn't just his moment, it's a reshuffling of the deck. And veterans feel it too. You think guys like The Miz, Dolph Ziggler, or even Sheamus, guys who built years of credibility, aren't wondering how much time they've got left on top? They see what's happening. They see the writing. And they're calculating their next moves accordingly. That's what makes the locker room atmosphere so volatile after a moment like this. No one knows what's next. And in WWE, that's either the most exciting or the most terrifying feeling in the world. So while fans are talking about Braun versus Roman, the roster is talking about survival. They're asking, how does this affect my story? Will I get less time on the card? Is the company shifting to favor the new blood? How do I stay relevant in a company that just fast-tracked a wrecking machine? The questions are flying. The tension is real. Braun Breakker didn't just confront a man. He disrupted a system. And in a place like WWE, that has consequences for everyone. What Braun Breakker did on Raw was more than bold, it was symbolic. Because when he stared down Roman Reigns, he wasn't just calling out a champion. He was drawing a line. A hard, unavoidable line between two generations. On one side, the old guard. Veterans. Legends. Main eventers forged through time, grit, and patience. On the other, the new blood, faster, hungrier, and ready to seize everything without waiting for permission. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a shot across the bow in a war that's been brewing for years in WWE. Let's start with what the old guard really is. It's not just about age. It's about position. Status. The guys who have been mainstays in WWE's ecosystem for 5, 10, 15 years. Roman Reigns is the apex of that class. He's held titles, headlined WrestleManias, transcended wrestling into pop culture. But around him is a thick wall of other names: Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes. Even LA Knight, who broke out late, still counts as part of that system. They've been through the grind. They've earned their keep. They've been the faces that WWE relied on through the PG era, through the Thunderdome, through the Reigns era. But their time isn't endless. And the new blood knows it. Guys like Braun Breakker, Grayson Waller, Carmelo Hayes, Ilya Dragunov, Austin Theory, Solo Sikoa. They're not trying to find a way in. They're trying to take over. Fast. Braun's move on Raw put that into crystal clear focus. He didn't call out someone from his generation. He didn't challenge Seth Rollins for a workhorse title or ask for a proving ground match against Sheamus. He went straight for the head. And in doing that, he made a statement to every other young star watching: you don't have to wait. You can take your shot now. That kind of aggression doesn't just spark conflict, it forces change. Because the old guard, for all their experience, isn't going to just hand the keys over. Roman Reigns is still in peak form. Seth Rollins is still burning down arenas every week. AJ Styles can still outwork anyone on the roster. These guys don't plan on leaving. And if the new blood wants their place, they'll have to fight for it, hard. This is where the tension lives. It's not scripted. It's not entirely public. But it's there, woven into the fabric of every booking decision and every promo that hints at a generational shift. WWE has been here before. In the early 2000s, it was Rock and Austin making way for Cena and Batista. In the early 2010s, it was Cena, Orton, and Punk paving the road for Roman, Seth, and Dean. And now? The cycle is repeating, but this time, the lines are sharper. Because the newer generation has tools the old one didn't. Social media, global branding, nil recruits, crossover exposure. Braun Breakker didn't rise in smoky gyms or dive bars. He was a Division I athlete. He was handpicked. Trained in WWE's Performance Center. He's a next-gen prototype. That gives him a different kind of edge, polished, prepped, and mission-ready. And that's threatening. Not because it's undeserved, but because it disrupts the path that many veterans had to fight tooth and nail to climb. For guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, the journey was filled with blood, sweat, and 10-year circuits before they even got TV time. Bron? He got a rocket. And he didn't waste it. That creates an invisible war backstage. A cold war between guys who had to earn everything in front of hostile crowds, and guys who came in with WWE's full machine behind them. But here's where Braun Breakker breaks the mold. He acts like someone who fought his way in, even if his rise was faster than most. He carries himself like a guy who knows he's stepping on toes, and doesn't care. Not out of disrespect, but out of focus. Because for Braun, the goal was never to earn it. The goal was to take it. And that mentality is what makes him the most dangerous member of this new generation. The old guard has history. The new blood has momentum. Right now, WWE is standing at a crossroads. Because if Braun's stare down with Roman is a sign of things to come, it's not just a match, it's a transition. A full-scale generational shift. And those shifts are never smooth. They come with ego clashes. Booking politics. Fan debates. Backstage tension. They come with the question, who's next? Roman Reigns doesn't get to stay forever. Seth Rollins can't burn it down forever. The crowd eventually shifts. The machine eventually moves on. But not without a fight. The next year of WWE might become the most interesting in a decade because of this one moment. Braun Breakker didn't just challenge Roman Reigns. He set the tone for a war. The old guard will respond. Not with words, but with matches. With political moves. With strategy. Because they know what's at stake. Legacy. Status. Relevance. And the new blood? They don't want to wait for the invitation anymore. They want to kick the doors down. Like Braun did. This is the spark. The war is coming. And the winner won't just be the best in the ring. It'll be the one who adapts fastest to a WWE that's changing whether the old guard likes it or not. In WWE, nothing this big ever just happens. Not a surprise return. Not a heel turn. And definitely not a rookie walking into Raw and confronting Roman Reigns live on television. It might feel spontaneous. Raw. Unscripted. But it's not. That moment between Braun Breakker and Roman Reigns wasn't just a bold creative decision, it was a calculated, long-form chess move. Because if there's one thing WWE understands better than any other entertainment brand on the planet, it's this: moments don't matter unless they lead somewhere. And the best ones? They're set in motion long before fans realize they're watching the first chapter. Let's break down why Braun Breakker standing in the ring with Roman Reigns didn't just happen, it was built. WWE doesn't debut talent on instinct. It debuts them on trajectory. Every major star of the last decade was introduced not as a gimmick, but as a long-term asset. The goal isn't just to pop. It's legacy. Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, they weren't revealed as singles competitors. They were introduced as the Shield. A faction with purpose. A faction designed to dominate. Finn Balor didn't just walk into WWE. His arrival in NXT was layered with mystery, production, backstory, and myth. Ronda Rousey? Shown in the crowd at big events for over a year before she stepped through the ropes. Cody Rhodes? Every detail of his return, from the logo to the entrance, was precision storytelling. So when Braun Breakker stared down the longest reigning champion of the modern era with zero prior build-up, zero teaser packages, and zero warning, that wasn't spontaneity. That was design. And the boldness of it tells you how much trust WWE has in the story it's about to tell. WWE has spent the last several years shifting from week-to-week storytelling to era-driven storytelling. The Bloodline saga is the blueprint. It's a long arc. One that's evolved, morphed, expanded. It isn't about individual feuds, it's about world building. The Bloodline story created rules, culture, tension. Characters that don't just exist, they live inside this reality. Braun Breakker entering that reality? That's not a one-off. That's a world-shifting event. And WWE knows how to seed those moments with surgical timing. This confrontation wasn't placed in a random segment. It was scheduled on a night Roman Reigns returned to Raw. A rare appearance. High viewership. High impact. It was time to hit when the Bloodline story had started to fracture, when cracks in Roman's armor were visible. When fans were questioning where things go next. Braun didn't just walk into Raw. He walked into the exact moment WWE needed a threat to the order. That's the genius of the blueprint. Because WWE doesn't want fans to see Braun as a new guy. They want him to feel inevitable. The same way Roman's dominance wasn't built in one night, Braun's rise isn't starting here, it's being revealed here. Behind the scenes, WWE's creative team likely planned this months in advance. Quiet build-up. Minimal exposure. Keep Braun strong in NXT. Keep him off the main roster until the moment really matters. When you look back, the signs were there. Braun wasn't overexposed in NXT. His character wasn't tampered with. He was kept serious. Focused. Violent. He wasn't made to do comedy. He didn't have a goofy gimmick to connect with fans. WWE protected his aura. They allowed him to remain dangerous. Why? Because they were preparing for this. For a collision. A confrontation with someone who's not just a star, but a system. Roman Reigns is the face of a WWE machine that's thrived on structure. Stability. Order. Braun Breakker? He's chaos. Not in the unpredictable sense. In the inevitable sense. The way a thunderstorm is chaotic. It doesn't show up for fun, it shows up because it's time. WWE loves these moments. They've done it before. When Brock Lesnar debuted in 2002, he didn't start with a mid-card feud. He attacked everyone. Then beat The Rock at SummerSlam for the Undisputed Championship. Fast. Brutal. Storyline shifting. When The Shield debuted, they immediately affected the main event. They didn't climb the ladder. They kicked it over. When Becky Lynch became the man, it wasn't part of a long-term script, it was lightning WWE knew how to bottle fast. This is the same move. And it's not being done to shock. It's being done to transition. Every dominant reign eventually ends. And when WWE ends a reign like Roman's, it can't be a fizzle. It has to be a detonation. That's why they're not feeding him another babyface redemption story. They're feeding him Braun Breakker. And if Braun is being positioned to be the one who flips the table, it means WWE is willing to center an entirely new chapter around him. This is how they pass the torch now, not with speeches. With impact. And there's more. WWE is no longer just a wrestling company. It's a content ecosystem. They're thinking about documentaries. Future A&E specials. Peacock exclusives. International expansion. Merchandise cycles. Theme music. Video game covers. And what sells in this era? Moments that feel unscripted, but are tightly planned. That stare down? That line? That silence? It's meme fuel. Clickbait. Social media fire. It's the kind of content that circulates beyond wrestling Twitter. It hits mainstream. It hooks people who haven't watched since Cena. It gets people talking who don't know what NXT is, but now want to know who that guy was who stared down Roman and didn't blink. That's WWE strategy in 2025. Tell a story through the moment, but plan it months in advance. So where does the blueprint go next? Possibilities: Braun gets quietly drafted or signed to Raw permanently. Roman disappears again, only to return at a major PPV with Braun waiting. The bloodline tries to deal with Braun before Roman has to. Braun starts dismantling Roman's allies as a warning. A slow, brutal build towards SummerSlam, Survivor Series, or even WrestleMania. And it's all part of the blueprint. Because WWE knows how to plant a seed and let it grow. They don't want Braun Breakker to be a hot angle. They want him to be the next era. And you don't launch an era by accident.